Hello and welcome to the Argyle Finance Leadership Forum. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have some important information to share with you, and then we will turn the floor over to our esteemed opening keynote speaker. First, we would like to take a moment to thank today's sponsors, Workiva, Rimini Street, and Lease Accelerator. Our sponsors are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which includes complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. We also welcome you to stay socially connected during today's event. For those of you who are active tweeters, please use the hashtag ArgyleDigital and follow us at Argyle Exec Forum. Also be sure to follow Argyle on LinkedIn for special announcements. I would also like to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we have curated based on the feedback we have received over the years from our members. We have worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints during the session today, and we truly appreciate our members' support of this policy. Finally, and most importantly, we would love to hear from you. So during each session, we encourage you to submit your questions and comments in the Q&A box on your screen. Following each presentation, we have set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on your questions. Thank you again for joining us. Now let's get started. Without further ado, I would like to introduce George Benaroya, Global CFO with careers at Procter & Gamble, Nivea, private equity firms, and NYU faculty. We are excited to have George with us for his opening keynote titled Inflation and Pricing Powered by AI, Best Practices from Industry Leaders. Welcome, George, and over to you.
Great, thanks very much, Brittany. And I must say that when I heard the overall title about resilience, I thought that is a terrific topic to also learn from each other. So the way that I'm going to run this part of the presentation is I'll be asking 6 questions, and you will be able to vote by either scanning the QR code or by clicking on the link that is on the chat room on your right-hand side. And the beauty of doing this is that then we're going to be able to see what everyone thinks. I think typically when we go to these type of meetings, we want to network and meet people and then go back to our companies and say, look, most people feel this way or that way about AI and that type of topics. There is a question now regarding AI, and you can just go ahead and reply to that question, and then I'll be sharing the results. The presentation is divided into 3 main sections. The first one is going to be about data and how do we go about it. The second about people, and the third about the best practices by very large companies and very small companies. So I will cover all 3 different sizes: small, mid-size, and large. So this is the first question, and I'm glad to see that so many of you have responded already. I will wait a second so you're able to see it. And the question was about whether you personally are using AI tools such as ChatGPT or one of those. I'll tell you in a sec that I also teach a class at NYU, and I would have thought that 80% or 90% of professors use AI. I use AI at least 20 times per day, but I learned in a survey that we did that only 8% of professors were actually using AI. There is an age component to that as well. So this is what the numbers look like. What I'll be doing for every question is I will keep it open so that you guys can keep replying. And then at the end, I will go back and show you all the responses for all the questions. That way we can save a bit of time. So just a quick intro. I started my career after my MBA at Procter & Gamble, was with P&G and Clorox for about 8 years. Then at Tetra Pak is a company with about $17 billion of revenue for 12 years. Then at Nivea or Beiersdorf, they make these cosmetics, the blue thing, for about 3 years. And for the last 5, I've been working in private equity as the global CFO. I spent about 1/2 of my career at headquarters in Switzerland or in New York, and the other half running local operations. Some businesses were small, say 20 million in revenue, and others were $2 billion. I've lived in 9 countries in Asia, Europe, Latin America, and now I'm back in the US. One thing that is a tiny bit different about me is that I have been to every country in the world, all 193 countries and the territories and Antarctica and so on. And the main reason was that I'm really curious as to how people make decisions. But it all got started, and now this is something very relevant, because many years ago, my managing director and the commercial director were arguing as to when to mention the price increases. And so I told them, listen, if you want, I do it. And so I've been to many of these countries just to increase prices and to see how people react to it and so on. Once per week, I do something that I love, and that is to teach a class at NYU. What I do is I bring to the class the most senior executives from each company that is a market leader. We have had Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, L'Oreal, Estee Lauder, JP Morgan, and these are sessions which are open, and then students ask questions. And in these sessions, we do ask them about pricing and artificial intelligence. And you will see it later on as I go through the slides. So I've been speaking about AI and pricing for about 5 years. I started back in 2018, speaking at the World Accounting Forum, then at the United Nations, on how to share best practices. And in general, while the topic is evolving, the principles remain the same, right? Which is about what would be the best way to go about these processes. So let's go ahead and start with the first question that I would like to get your feedback. And these are real numbers. So what I always do when I want to make a point is I show a real example of what we are talking about. So what you see here is how much someone with a digital strategy makes per year. So in the US, they make about $90,000. But if they live in New York, they make $126,000. And if they live in El Paso, Texas, they make $64,000. So think about it. We are in the same country, and people living in New York make twice as much as people living in El Paso. If you're the CFO and you're selling products, what would you do? Would you have a national price, or would you lower your prices when you sell in El Paso? And we'll take a vote, and then I will show you different examples of what companies do. So what would you say? Should we sell at a lower price in El Paso, or do you think that we should have a national price list? Okay, so it's getting now more, it's not all 100%. Thanks. I'll go ahead and keep going, and then at the end, I'll show you all the results that we have collected. So what you see now is what companies are doing. So in the case of McDonald's, they do sell at a lower price. The Big Mac costs 54% more in the New York area than in El Paso. But there are some other companies, like the ones that I have worked at in beauty care, where they tend to have a national price list. So if you look at how L'Oreal does it, they charge the exact same price, $20 for this skincare cream. Now, if you think about it, we do debate this, right, at headquarters, whether we should sell it at a lower price in El Paso because our consumers there, their purchasing power is much lower, or not. And typically there are no right or wrong answers. But the whole idea here is I would like you to think about the impact that this has on data. And then I'll show you the numbers, right? About how many data points we have to manage when we make these decisions. Although if you think about it, at least that's what I do in my case, is what I focus is on what is going to be best for the business, right? Regardless of the data points and so on. So now let me quickly show you 2 examples of a national and a global price list. And typically I explain this in more detail, but now time is an issue. So I was working on a project in Texas, in a city there that has another city on the Mexican side that has the same name. And my colleagues told me that instead of buying their medicine in the US, they crossed the border to Mexico to buy it. And I thought, Jesus, you know, it cost me, or it cost us, sorry, $20,000 to pay the healthcare benefits for them. So I asked them, listen, if you have insurance, why would you do that? And they told me that it was actually cheaper, regardless of insurance, to just cross the border. So I crossed the border myself that weekend to go and see if that was the case. What I found on the other side was this, all these hotels and people, you know, on the pool and so on. And so I was asking the staff, listen, I'm here to do research, you know, I want to see the pharmacies. And they told me, yeah, go on that street. And so I saw this, which is what I was looking for. So I went around all the pharmacies, and what I saw was that the price at which a product like insulin is sold, this is the price in the US, and this is the price in Mexico. It's about 7 times cheaper, the same in Europe. Now, when we go to an iPhone, the price is, I would say, the same, right? There are minor differences on the price, but it's not like in Thailand, it costs 7 times less. It costs $150. No, it's always about the same. So this is what happens when we have a national price list or a global price list. In Europe, in general, we tend to have, in the companies where I work, the same prices in Europe because it's very easy for consumers to buy, even on Amazon, right, from another country and things of that nature. So let's go and look into the impact that this has on data. And what I'm showing now is the number of clients that companies have. And I'm doing it for each industry. I picked the 5 industries that make up about 75% of the business. And what you see is that if you're a small clinic, an urgent care, you know, walk-in clinic, you tend to have about 10,000 customers or patients. And if you're in the consumer business or in IT, you tend to have 250 million. Now, if you think about it, the idea with AI is that we're going to be able to personalize the pricing to that level of magnitude because the data will be so much easier to manage. If we look into SKUs or products, what we see is that, you know, companies in the financial sector tend to have much fewer. But a company like Johnson & Johnson, if you count all the SKUs or products that they sell worldwide, is over 130,000. And so, you know, when I go to SAP, yes, I'm able to see all these products country by country and so on, and client by client and so on. But the amount of data that we have to manage and clean up is massive. And that is part of what we have to do. Now, let's talk a bit about people. And there'll be you know, several questions. One that I can anticipate or mention is whether you will send a robot to increase prices to a client. But before we go into that, let's go into the one about headcount reductions. Will you say that we will have a headcount reduction in finance over the next 3 years due to AI? I'll keep the question open and I'll go to the next, and then we'll see the overall results. So in addition to going with the commercial team to explain price increases to the biggest retailers in the world, clients which are for us billions of dollars, I also go and visit very small customers. When I do a visit in India into shops like this, I typically visit 30 of these shops on a day. And so just think about it. And you will see on another photo that that's me actually doing it. To talk to this client, which is thousands of clients in many cases, right? Would you rather send a person or a robot to talk to them, to explain it to them? And let's take a vote on that. That's me, by the way, in one market in Africa. What would you do? Would you send a robot to increase prices to a customer or a person? So I see the data on my screen, which comes a bit faster, and you'll get to see it. Yeah, we're at 30 responses. Okay, and we'll get to see all the responses at the end. So net, in my opinion, the key point on pricing is that communication is key. And what we do in the companies where I work is we prepare the deck for the sales force. And yes, communications is involved, and yes, marketing and sales are involved. But we try to have a consistent message to justify our price increases. And each group of clients is different, right? Large companies, small companies, and so on. In this class that I teach at NYU, not only they learn how to calculate a price increase when it's delayed and so on, but the main thing that I want them to learn is how to communicate a price increase to clients. And then I share how earlier in my career, when I was at Procter & Gamble, we did a price increase to our biggest client. And they stopped selling, they stopped buying from us for several months, and that was quite painful. So the idea is, what would you do if that happens to you, and how would you go about it, and so on, a bit of critical minding. And this is my final slide on communications. In general, what I find is that it's critical to explain price increases well, to take the time to do that, and to be prepared to have responses when we are challenged on the price increases. But the other thing that I would like to share now that I have the data is what happens overall, and not to us, but this is in all industries, when we send a price increase. So what you see here is that when we send an email with a price increase, only about 29% of people open the email. And only 15% actually read most of the emails. Most people don't even mind, don't even care to read it and so on. So I think this is important, right, in terms of data, to be able to understand how our clients and consumers react, or what do they do with price increases. So let me move now to the last part, which is about the tools that we use and best practices. And one of the questions that I have for you, and then I'll tell you what the research from McKinsey is saying. The question is, has your organization deployed AI in more than one function? I'm trying to wait a tiny bit to get some more responses. I see more here. I'll show you the overall results, but something that was really interesting for me to see in this research by McKinsey is that only 1/3 of the companies which have implemented AI has done it in more than one function. So let's look quickly into how Fortune 500 companies use AI for pricing. And what you will see on the left-hand side is the prices for what, right? So how do they use these prices for what kind of products or services? Some of them are obvious, right? Netflix, that they will use it to do the proper pricing for movies. On the right-hand side, you see some companies that we are fully familiar with. If you think about it, when Uber was launched, it was a shock for many of us, the fact that they were changing prices continuously, right, based on supply and demand. Now it's something that we're used to it for many other industries as well. And you see there, how different companies go about it. In the case of Walmart, they even change prices due to the weather. And in retail, they do a bit of the same. So if the summer or the winter are likely to be very different versus what was expected and the stock that they have, then they will run promotions and sales. And AI does make it easier. Now, one thing that I always like to know is how much will it cost and how long will it take? And for small, well, in general, it costs about 1% of sales to implement AI. If you're a small business, they typically spend about 0.1% of sales. For a mid-sized business doing, for example, supply chain automation, they spend about 0.5%. And for large businesses, these are numbers based on what they have actually spent. So real numbers, they spend about 1% of sales. And this is of global sales, of course. So this is a good benchmark to compare when we do this type of investments. Regarding how long does it take, it takes somewhere between 3 months and 3 years. For small businesses, they're able to do something quick in about 3 months. Mid-sized businesses, I would say about 9 months. And for large businesses, what I've seen in most cases is that it takes 3 years. In one of the companies that I work at, we did the SAP implementation. It took 10 years to do it globally, and it cost over $100 million. And many times I tell my colleagues when I am unable to get something from SAP that I'll just stop at Walmart, buy, QuickBooks for, $99 and be able to get that data. So the more global you are, the greater complexity you have, and that increases not only the cost, but also the time that it takes to do it. So just to try to wrap it up, one of the questions that I would like to ask you, and the responses are based on further research that was done, is what is your top concern regarding the implementation of AI in your company? And there you have the different things that you can pick. You need to pick one. While you respond to that one, I will go to my final slide. And this is about the process that we follow to implement AI. So regarding people, what we do seek is for the executive team to endorse the project. If not, we don't do it. And we show them a 3-year vision, and then we tell them, listen, we're going to start here, and this is what we're going to get. We do want to get skilled resources higher, marginal people higher. And then we're very transparent to respond to the question of, will I lose my job? In terms of the process, we always do a small proof of concept where we try to spend as little money as possible. And one of the things that is actually quite painful is the data cleanup, the data integration and labeling and so on. And one of the things that we learned when we do all this is that there are exceptions to the rule. So if you think about it, this week, when you went shopping or when you were trying to make a payment, it didn't always work. And didn't you hate when you tried to call, the 1-800 number and there was no one there to solve your problem? So I focus on that, right, on the 1% that is not working properly. We do request from vendors to show us one example where it didn't work, where it was a failure. And yes, it's hard, but that's something that we request. And what I've learned, even though I hate it, as you probably will as well, is that typically we need more than one tool. And finally, what we try to get out of it is a clear payout. And I only count the payout when I can see it on the profit and loss, and when I see the money coming into the bank account. And our target for this project is an ROI of 30% or higher. So with that, I have 4 minutes. What I could do is, Brittany, if you have any questions or comments, I'll go ahead and show the results that we have collected, and then I can respond to any of those questions in the meantime.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much, George, for such an excellent presentation. As a reminder to the audience, you can still submit your questions in the chat box. This first question, George, first of all, they say thank you so much for such an insightful presentation, but how do you ensure price elasticity in diverse global markets is well understood as pricing decisions are made?
So what we do is we start with a global price list, which let's say is at a level of 100. And then we do both country adjustments and then other adjustments based on competition and other factors. But what I do want to see as CFO is at which price we're selling in different countries. You guys understand the concept of net prices. So I don't care at all about the price. I only want to see the net price after all discounts and so on. And then what we do is when we do the budgets, the different markets or countries or regions have to justify the overall adjustment by region or by country. Let me go to the next one, and you can go with the next question, Brittany, if you want.
Perfect. This next question, how has inflation directly impacted organizations that were in the process of hiring new employees?
So in markets where we are more used to inflation, that will be in Latin America, there are already processes to automatically adjust price increases or do price increases every year. Overall, the way that I present it to the board is I show them the increases in salaries when we are going to do the budget. And I say, look, we're going to increase salaries so much. The inflation has been so much. So unless we do a price increase to match our salary increases and our cost increases, we're not going to be able to make it. So we do adjustments on a country by country basis. But the fact that we have had inflation basically forces us to increase prices.
Perfect. Thank you, George. This next question too asks, can you share any predictions for what inflation will look like next year?
So what I learned, doing this for years is that the right answer is I don't know. Because when we have done research, you see, by the way, all the answers with all the responses that I'm posting. So we did some research to look at when people were right and when they were wrong, and basically it was a flip of the coin, right? So that is something that different research will show different numbers, and net, I don't know.
Awesome. Thank you, George. And it looks like we do have time for at least one last audience question. How do you see, what are the biggest concerns around new AI implementations?
I would say that what worries me the most, this one is interesting, at least for me, is that, we get all excited about AI and we put our best IT resources to do this type of projects. And typically we don't have enough resources to do it properly or to keep taking care of the other things where we have problems. So I would say that headcount increases is the main concern that I have as we do these implementations. I think that's the end in terms of time. So basically, thanks very much to everyone. You can the easiest way to reach out to me is just Google my name or look me up on LinkedIn, and then I'll be happy to continue the discussions.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much again, George, for such an excellent keynote. I also want to thank everyone who joined us today for the session. This session, along with all of today's content, will be made available on demand following the event. Thank you again, George.
Thank you.